This is gonna be a long one. Resident Evil 6 feels like a big moment for the franchise. The marketing for this thing was huge, at least it felt like it, feeling like a finale of the series, having viral marketing with live action ads and even including previous titles and certain special editions, even giving us a legendary meme. Across the Resident Evil franchise, there's at least one recognizable face in the titles, but for the first time we have an ensemble cast that interacts with each other. Sure, the Redfield siblings cross paths in Code Veronica, and Jill and Chris always seem to find each other, but here we have two of the big players from the previous games in Leon and Chris, and even bringing back Sherry Birkin, alongside a few ghosts and a special lady. But not only was this game marketed as a big title, it was a big title, having 3 whole campaigns with each one having its own distinctive style. Before jumping into all those campaigns, I want to take us immediately to the end. Resident Evil 4 is the golden child of this era of Resident Evil. Resident Evil 5, while different, is still accepted and enjoyed. Resident Evil 6 is the one people just do not want to talk about. See, 5 and 4, while more action games, still kind of have a sense of Resident Evil about them. 4 tries with the atmosphere, and 5 has the benefit of being the closing story on Wesker and Chris. So, in a sense, 6 can technically be whatever they want it to be, and in this case, everything. Since 4, the needle has gradually moved closer and closer to big Hollywood action game until even surpassing that with 6. Moving from the rundown streets of Raccoon City filled with a sense of dread and abandonedness to now an overpopulated city with big set pieces that includes helicopters. Leaving a big giant T-Rex in the middle of a shopping mall asking you, what is Resident Evil? It can't just be zombies because those are here. It can't be Leon because he's here too, and it can't be the crazy cheesy plots because it's also here. Was it the moody atmosphere, the iconic settings, or was it the more survival take on gameplay? Having limited resources, moments of backtracking? Personally, to me, Resident Evil is this.
The self-destruct sequence has been activated.
Resident Evil 6 is probably the furthest the series has ever been from its core identity, but it wants you to believe it's in line with previous games, hammering lines like this every chance it gets.
It's Raccoon City all over again.
Telling you that it's like it, but never really reaching that feeling of actually being it. At the time, critics found this game okay. The more positive reviews make mention of it being a good action game, even having one of the best stories in a Resident Evil game to date, with the asterisk of Resident Evil games not really having a good plot. Coming back to that, the more negative reviews from places like GameSpot and Giant Bomb just don't find the game good. There's this developer interview that sums up a lot of the game, where they talk about having this cool image of Chris and Leon pointing guns at each other, and not knowing how they got to that point, but basically we'll build a story around that. It boils down to, we're gonna do some cool shit, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but we're gonna try our best to make it make sense. Make sense?
Got it memorized?
Now, about that good story. Resident Evil 6 begins in a little place called Europe. Here, mercenary for hire Jake Mueller is given the C-Virus by his employers for the upcoming job, only there's no effect. In comes Sherry Birkin to drop some exposition about how he's immune or something. Also, Sherry works for the US government now. At the same time, in only a little way, is Chris Redfield and his ragtag group getting ready for a mission. You have Chris, Piers, and Trauma, a whole lot of trauma. Chris, still working for the BSAA, is sent here because they got intel on BOWs in the area, and something I learned recently is that the BSAA is its own thing, not working for any one government and instead the United Nations, thus giving them a lot of reach in each area of the world, which makes sense why Sherry is told to keep a low profile. Sherry's boss wants to bring Jake back to the US of A because his blood could lead to a vaccine to the C-Virus. Jake is willing to cooperate, but requires some payment. Neo Umbrella is also name dropped as the ones backing these mercenaries, leading to the big antagonist of this game, Ada Wong. Chris, Piers, Jake, and Sherry all meet, where Chris is very drawn to Jake for some reason.
Hey! We met?
We get some nice characterization from Chris here. Chris is established as the guy. He cares deeply for his squad mates and is extremely level-headed, even when Jake decides to be a bit of a... Piers, on the other hand, is a bit more hot-headed, ready to go. Chris decides to help Jake and Sherry and get them a ride out to their point, while he continues on his mission. They head into City Hall, where they run into Ada, and she tells them all about Neo Umbrella. Piers is a bit apprehensive about Ada, but Chris decides to trust her. Ada then lures his entire squad into a trap where Chris is forever scarred by the trauma. Sherry and Jake run into S. Tonka again, who was introduced earlier as a bit of a Nemesis clone, and takes down their plane, leading them to being stranded in the snow. They do a bit of trauma bonding, and Sherry makes mention of how Leon and Claire are really the only two people she's had in her life, because there's no way she had a father figure who was completely off screen and not important at all. Nope. Sherry and Jake are a funny duo, mostly because we find out through Ada that Jake's daddy is Wesker, and with Sherry being the daughter of Birkin and Jake being the son of Wesker, this is basically Boruto. Jake has zero clue who Ada's talking about though. Now, the one thing I thought was that Jake was born in a tube. However, that was completely wrong, and Wesker indeed who? Sherry and Jake get captured, and we get a time skip of 6 months. I'm not kidding. There's literally like a 6-month gap. Anyways, our next character enters the game, and we catch up with Leon, who proceeds to shoot a zombified
Mr. President!
This part always had me confused, because this is the very first scene with Leon, and it feels like we're missing a scene or two before to properly establish what's going on. But if we take account that Leon has always had close ties with the president, we can assume he's here as some sort of bodyguard, and due to the information we find out later, we can assume this is him coming to find him and seeing he's been infected, and that's how he ended up here. Or we can just call it bad writing. The president, who is not the same president from RE4, come on guys, that's not how terms work, plus he's in Infinite Darkness. Now, why would I name drop that? Was going to go public with the cover-up of Raccoon City, but someone got him and the whole town of Tall Oaks first. Okay Leon, give us the line.
Say the line, Bart!
It's Raccoon City all over again.
Helena blames herself because of what's happening and tells Leon she can tell him everything at the cathedral. So Leon and Helena go through a ruined city, and Leon tries his best to help everyone he comes across. A little bit of PTSD, and Leon being a good guy, I assume. They hold out at a gun shop and eventually take a bus out of the city. Leon and Helena get in touch with Hunnigan, where the second antagonist gets introduced. Derek C. Simmons, the C stands for simp. If you know, you know. The bus gets into a crash, and Leon says grab a hold of something, so naturally he grabs Helena. Leon is shown to have a lot of remorse early on, really wanting to help people out and even feeling like the reason behind the crash. He's also starting to get fed up with Helena, because once they reach the cathedral, she just keeps delaying, now going from I'll tell you at the location to it's better if I just show you. We also see what caused the outbreak. This big titty thingy. The cathedral is owned by the Simmons family, which is apparently a very long bloodline, making this the perfect ground for our lab since not just anyone can come in or snoop around. Down in the lab is a videotape named Happy Birthday Ada, where Ada comes out of a cocoon. Helena has no idea what this means, and neither do we. This isn't even what she wanted to show him. This was just here. This is the part that I think gets a bit muddled. Helena worked with Simmons to attack the president and gave an opening so the big titty monster could spray its gas into a hole and infect the president. Never thought I'd say a sentence like that. Thanks, Capcom. Helena only did this because Simmons captured her and her sister at some point and would only give her back if this was done. I get she didn't know if she could fully trust Leon or if Leon would believe her. We have the benefit of the doubt because we saw Leon stab a guy in his eye that grew out of his mouth. Leon and Helena find the missing sister, but she comes out of a cocoon and transforms into, can I show this? Ada shows up and the three team up to defeat the mutated sister, where they have this touching goodbye.
No more tears! Not until I avenge your death. Please. Forgive me.
Ada says bye how Ada does, and Leon and Helena find their way out of the catacombs, or dungeon area? Both? I don't know. Once Leon and Helena find their way outside, they're quickly told they're number one suspects in the incident. Leon asks Hunnigan to fake their deaths, and this leads to a pretty stupid moment. Simmons is on his way to China, so the two are going to follow him. Now, to be very clear, Leon doesn't have a plan. It's just to chase Simmons down and make him admit he did everything, which is What? Also, they fake their deaths and yet somehow end up on a government-issued plane? What? Okay, bringing it back just a little bit, we meet up with Chris again, who only finds himself in a bottle turning into a drunk at a bar. Now, the truly monstrous thing is how he likes his steak. Pierce shows back up and recruits Chris back to the BSAA. Now, this turn of Chris is fairly in line. Chris is the type of guy to beat himself up over the loss of a partner. I mean, that's what Resident Evil 5 showcased, so him losing an entire squad and fangirl, yeah, that sounds about right. Pierce isn't alone, and the whole bar is basically BSAA, showing that people still respect and look to Chris. It's a touching little moment. Chris and Pierce end up in China due to several mentions of the C virus being there, the same virus that was used in Europe. And at the same time, Jake and Sherry are finally escaping from their imprisonment. Why now instead of any days prior? Plot. You're telling me this is the only time they could escape? Yeah. Okay. It is a little far-fetched that Jake and Sherry were imprisoned this entire time and no one was searching, but it does kind of make sense with the twist coming up. Jake and Sherry also had this bit of flirting going on, but it's been 6 months and I don't know if you guys, stay cleaned. Jake has daddy issues, just like his daddy, and continues to blame him for the person he is, which Sherry immediately calls out.
Your father's actions have nothing to do with you.
Yeah, but his blood does. It's the whole reason why we're even here. I mean, come on. You really think that crazy doesn't run in the family? That nothing of who my father was didn't somehow get passed on down to me? You of all people should know that's true. I'm just saying. The man that I am, things that I've done, at least it all makes a little bit more sense now. What?
You can blame your father all you want, but at some point, you have to take responsibility for your own actions.
Leading back to the question of who the did Wesker Jake and Sherry grab a cool bike and get away while Chris continues down the path of vengeance. Now turning into a story of taking down Ada Wong to avenge his fallen comrades. Flipping the script of earlier, where he was doing everything he could to make sure his squad stayed alive, to now wanting them to follow his command to a T. Also reversing the roles of Pierce and Chris, where Chris was the level-headed one and now the hothead, and Pierce being more calm. Jake and Sherry team up with Team Chris again, leading Jake to question if Chris knew his daddy. If only you knew. Chris runs into a giant BOW snake that breaks his team down one by one, and he blames Ada. This leads to a pretty big break between Chris and Pierce though, where Pierce thinks helping Jake and Sherry should take a priority, but Chris is hellbent on bringing down Ada. Meanwhile, up in the sky, Leon and Helena's flight is being boarded by big titty dommy mommies. Again, thank you Capcom. The flight gets hijacked because one whiff of the gas gets you infected to turn into a zombie, unless you have glossy hair details. I don't make the rules. Leon tries his best to land it, but it does end up crashing, where the two meet up with Sherry and Jake. Okay, you got me with this one. It was actually really nice to see Leon and Sherry together again, especially because Sherry feels like a little mini Leon here. Secret agent, insane healing factor, the usual. The two duos team up to bring down U-Haul once again, and after that we get a crazy revelation that who Sherry was gonna meet was in fact Simmons. This recontextualizes a lot of Sherry's interactions, first with her mentioning not getting involved with the BSAA way back when, and kind of fixing the problem with them being captured for 6 months. Simmons is aware Jake is important because Simmons works as an anti-bioterrorist. Ironic, I know. But he isn't working with Neo Umbrella, at least from my understanding. Those two are different factions at play, and he knows Neo Umbrella wouldn't just kill Jake or Sherry due to their blood. So I'm assuming he assumed they were safe, to a degree. But Simmons was also studying the C virus because the gas creature is his work, right? Anyways, Sherry decides to trust Leon over Simmons and believes him when he says Simmons is the bad guy, trust me. The two teams split and decide to meet up again at Simmons' rendezvous. On the way en route, Chris tracks down Ada, and after 10 years plus, Leon and Chris finally meet on screen. And of course, it ends in a draw. chooses to defend Ada because of course he would, and Chris is a little confused. Ada drops a little flash grenade and Leon gives Chris a heart-to-heart.
Chris, wait!
We both want the same thing here. Alright.
The two teams split off with Chris pursuing Ada and Leon after Simmons. Chris, now a newly changed man because of Leon, decides to bring Ada in and not kill her anymore because of justice, driving off to chase her down in her little red vehicle. Team Leon finally catches Simmons, who basically admits to everything and doubles down once Team Jake arrives. Sherry hands Leon all the data about Jake and decides to make a run for it, only to get captured again. Simmons gets no-scoped by a random guy while Ada taunts him over the phone.
I'm just giving you exactly what you gave me, Simmons. At first, you'll be afraid, but don't worry. You're just becoming the monster you always were. You and everyone else on the planet.
At this very moment, Chris and Pierce catch up to Ada on, surprise, surprise, a boat. Or like a Navy boat. But it's still a boat. Stupid boat. Simmons, now infected with a stronger virus due to Jake's blood, decides to literally cry as his men decide to leave him. He's also surprised at Leon defending Ada, even knowing that she works for Neo Umbrella. Helena gets the final shot off on him, and I'm glad they gave it to her. They could have easily given this to Leon, but it's nice to get some sisterly revenge. And speaking of revenge, Chris and Pierce finally run into Ada on the other end of things, who then promptly gets shot by Simmons' men. So I guess they didn't leave for nothing. Ada drops down a case of the stronger C virus, who... No! Pierce! Don't pick that up! Pierce! Before Ada dipped, she talked about spreading the virus to everyone and everywhere, leading to Chris and Pierce hopping into a jet and doing jack shit because the missile still goes off. Chris calls Leon to try to get him out of there, but it's too late. The missile hits and zombies are everywhere, just like...
It's Raccoon City all over again.
Leon and Helena are okay though, and Chris tells Leon of Ada's disconnect.
Leon, wait. There's something I need to tell you. Ada Wong is dead.
A summoner has disconnected.
Leon takes it as well as he can.
Sherry and Jake need you. Don't let them down.
Are you okay?
Let's just find the survivors and get the hell out of here.
Leon and Helena try to help people evacuate and head to the evacuation area, only for Simmons to greet them there. Simmons transforms into a T-Rex, literally, and hey, look at that, Ada's alive. What do you know? Almost like it was two different people, huh? Funny. The trio knocks down Tammy and proceeds forward up, where Leon opens up a little bit about his feelings for Ada.
She's more than just a friend, isn't she? You have feelings for her.
Simmons, however, is still not down, and Ada is now soloing him. Leon does some acrobatics when she gets knocked down and holds her close in a very dramatic scene that I'm sure a lot of normal people who do not write fanfics or any of that loved. So, me. Simmons gets knocked down again, and we find out RE6 is actually a rom-com.
What are you waiting for?
Go after her.
No.
Team Leon makes it to the roof where the bug from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie is, and if you don't get that reference, here you go.
Another one. That one is even uglier.
And Leon ends Simmons in the most RE way possible. Rocket launcher. Simmons falls to his death for the final time, and would you look at that? Thanks, Capcom. Ada also left Leon a present in the form of evidence, all incriminating Simmons as the mastermind behind it all, or at least the present and stuff. I still don't know about the rest. Back to Chris. Chris and Piers make it to the location where Jake and Sherry are being held, and Chris gives off some major death flags.
It's been 3 years since I killed Wesker. I can't let this war follow me forever. After we rescue Jake, I'm turning in my gun.
What?
Wait a minute.
It's about time someone took my place. I'd be honored if it was you.
I don't think I'm ready for that.
You made it this far, haven't you?
They released Jake and Sherry, and we finally, after so many years, get some sort of resolution to the RE5 ending. I've said it before, the RE5 ending is pretty bad for how monumental that should feel, but this gives us some type of resolution. Chris now decides to submit himself as the GOAT with this single interaction with Jake, who now apparently really loves his dad.
I can see your father in you.
How did you know?
Wait, hold on a second. So you knew him?
Yeah, I did. But I'm the one that killed him.
It was you?
That's right.
Chris? Better put a leash on that puppy.
This is between me and him. Go ahead. Shoot. You have every right to. Just promise me you'll survive. The world depends on it.
Who the hell are you to tell me what to do?
Stop it!
Put your gun down, now! Tell me, we just following orders? Or was it personal?
Both.
Jake, please stop.
Put a bullet in your head!
Put your gun down.
Drop your
Don't
weapon!
do this!
The go! I feel I should clarify that I was only mildly joking. Jake is going through a bit of an identity crisis here or over the course of the story. He's a mercenary whose life never really meant anything, to now being an important person who has gotten closer to someone, when the last time he did that it ended terribly for him. To also finding out his father was a monster and kind of wondering if he's heading down that path too. It's not as deep as that, but it's there somewhere. The group finds Ada's real final present in a giant cocoon thing, and when it hatches, spawns the ugliest looking squid I've ever seen, and I've never even seen a squid in person. Chris and Pierce decide to deal with it somehow and let Jake and Sherry escape. This bothers Sherry because she wants to help and doesn't feel like they can deal with it alone. Jake's reasoning is he decides both him and Sherry are more important, and if that's how Chris and Pierce want to die, well, that's on them. But Jake and Sherry need to survive so they can help people around the world with their blood. But it's not as simple as leaving though, as they run into correct name of guy. Again, giving them a very fitting final location, lava. Jake beats his ass and quickly disposes of him. They then hop onto an elevator thingy that goes really fast. But Tanko, now named Nums2, decides to pursue them more, even going as far as shooting lava out of his ass to fly upward to cut them off. This is the Resident Evil universe, so there's a box of magnums here, and Jake and Sherry finish him off together. Aww. Riding the elevator thingy into the sunset, so everyone makes it out safely. Safely. Safe. Chris and Pierce have trouble with this goo thingy. What's the correct name? Heos? Chris and Pierce's situation is ironic because Chris is coming to save the kid of the man he hated with all his heart. Pierce works for the BSAA, whose sole thing is to stop BOWs, and Pierce becomes the one to save his captain. I won't lie to you, this hurt a little. There isn't really a lot of time spent here with these two, but there is some bond here. And when Pierce sacrifices himself and lets Chris go by himself, it does tug a little on the heartstrings. Chris definitely got the short end of the stick in the story by having the most damage done to him. Losing a partner, losing squad mates, you know, thinking he killed Ada and that was like Leon's girlfriend. So like he's not having a good time in the story. This is really bad for him. But at least this ending here is pretty solid. Except, you know, it's not the ending. Instead, Chris flies off into a Pokeball and the squid thing tries to follow him and Pierce finally tries to kill it. And then Chris is saved. Fade to black, credits. It's an awkward ending. I know there's a whole TV trope of not seeing a body means he's still alive, but even our alive characters in this franchise don't come back, so good luck. Chris does have the best after credit scene from a story perspective, continuing to work for the BSAA, both for peers and the people like him. Just throwing it out there, Chris kind of won me over here. Jake and Sherry's ending is also pretty sweet. Jake giving his blood so vaccines were made, and even lowering his payment to $50. Okay, that's good, but put the sunglasses on. Leon. Helena is visiting her sister's grave and decides she's ready to take accountability, which is nice, and it's a nice little character moment. But Leon says, hey, you've been cleared. We're covering everything up. Saw good. You're telling me the guy who wanted to take down corrupt organizations, especially because of the cover-up of Raccoon City, is now okay with cover-ups. He even says the president would have wanted it. Wait, you mean the same president who said we should be truthful and go open about Raccoon City? Nah, I don't believe it. Put Resident Evil Degeneration on. How the fuck did we get here, Capcom? A little after RE4, Capcom and Sony would team up for some more RE movie shenanigans, only this time the product would be CG. Resident Evil Degeneration is the first in a handful of said CG titles, bringing back Claire Redfield, who has an amazing design, and this version of Leon.
Who the fuck are you?
Everyone in this movie looks fine, but Leon, which will be a common thread in this section of the video. This won't be a one-to-one plot thing, instead it's more of a look at Leon's characterization, or lack thereof, leading up to RE6 because, yes, these movies are in fact canon and fit perfectly on the RE timeline. Despite them being canon, they're more like your typical anime movies or the shonen variant, where they have some cool stuff but don't really push anything along or have very small details that go, see, we're totally canon. This Leon is basically Batman but without the cowl or glowing white eyes or really anything cool. Maybe one cool thing. Instead, he just kind of pops up out of nowhere and stares a lot and is very brooding, which is what they wanted to go for. The movie takes place almost immediately after 4, but before 5, making this feel a little jarring. Watching this, I was under the impression this was before 4, and I could buy Leon being a moody boy in the past. Being forced into a secret organization to protect his loved ones would make anyone a little bit edgy. But when I found out this was after 4, I was a little confused. To go from a guy who is spouting one-liners and saying, no thanks bro, to a Leon who barely says anything and isn't as quippy until much later in the film feels very sudden, like we missed a step somewhere. It doesn't help that he feels the most stiff out of everyone here. Even when he's doing this gimmick of popping out of nowhere, he just kind of keeps his hands to his sides at all times, feeling very lifeless when everyone else feels like they have some sort of personality to them. Which makes this scene a female character name pouring out her heart and backstory to Leon as he does the Robert Pattinson meme hilarious.
I haven't heard a word from Curtis in 3 years.
Leon's main personality traits are he's a super secret agent with close ties to the president, snarky, and very much a sim for women. I really hate calling him this, but it rings so true. Just wait until Infinite Darkness. They also make Leon very dumb, at least later. The first one isn't too bad. The actual cool thing these movies sort of establish is the state of the world in the RE universe, showcasing a nice little trajectory to RE6. While Umbrella was the overall looming threat and big bad, they weren't really all that important, because someone else will just come along and pick up where they left off. In this case, this random pharmaceutical company who got their hands on the T-Virus and G-Virus. The G-Virus being in the movie gives us the big bad at the end, who is voiced by Chris's RE5 voice actor, which is kind of funny hearing.
I couldn't forgive them for covering up the Raccoon City atrocity.
Seeing the G-Virus being the unstoppable and weird breeding virus it is pretty cool, reminding us just how dangerous this strain of the virus is. Now, depending on where you land, this next thing may bother or may not bother you. And that's that Leon is the main character. Sure, Claire is here and sometimes other people, but Leon is the focus, at least in the ones I'm covering. Hell, Claire doesn't even get to do anything cool but press some buttons. Leon gets this whole Leon scene, which I'm either going to show cut up or there's going to be an awkward cut.
We'll engage soon. Level 4 submerged system. 11, 10, 9, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So if you go into these movies wanting to see screen time of your favorite RE character, you may be a little disappointed. Leon being written as more broody and dark feels like a choice they made just because, without any real thought behind it, just a different take for a different take. Sure, we can say it's because he's upset with the American government about Raccoon City, or maybe he suffered from some sort of PTSD, but in this movie, it's never really established. And when this is supposed to be the direct sequel to 4, it feels like a 180 from the Leon we just met, and doesn't even feel like an evolution from that Leon, since that Leon never showed any kind of PTSD or moodiness. So for that, it gets a Twilight Patterson out of 5.
Last one, just follow along till you catch up. Alright guys, today we are going to be observing the behavior of Planaria, aka...
The next chronological movie is actually a miniseries. And my god, why is it a miniseries? This is probably the worst one out of them all. Released on... In 2011, Infinite Darkness is fear because holy hell did they butcher Leon and Claire, and just make really weird choices overall. First, we actually get a design that looks much closer to Leon and not something off of Tamu, and something a bit closer to that of what we see in RE6. Claire's design is from the game we're covering in the next video, and while these designs are good, they use the new voice actors from the remake, creating this awkward uncanniness, at least for me. Because when you see certain models or designs that already have established VAs, it can feel a bit weird hearing a new voice out of them. Like Capcom, we're still sidelining Claire and talking about Leon. Leon's portrayal is much more of a middle ground between the last movie and 4. Still a bit dark, but way more one-liners and doing cool shit. That trade-off though, is Leon being at his dumbest. So Leon wants to bring these shady organizations down, and this movie does make a really good question of what if the call is coming from inside the house, making Leon have to question everything. Yet when he sees his partner on this job injecting himself with something, he flat out ignores it. Fine, we can chalk it up to maybe it's none of his business. He then decides to have this long talk about the cover-up of Raccoon City and that bothering him. This is a very big key point in the show, establishing how the cover-up has made him a bit jaded, questioning things, and struggling with the fight. Speaking of fights, in Degeneration, Leon and Claire are established as fighting the same fight, but doing so differently. Leon with a more direct-to-the-source wham bam, and Claire helping out folks who are affected by said organizations, and trying to bring people into the public focus as a way to put these organizations on blast. This is shown off directly here, with Leon going straight to the source, and Claire uncovering the mystery via clue. This is extremely important for the end because halfway through the series, Mr. Fear here explains to Leon that the US is actually the bad guy, using BOWs in a third world country as a way to test them. So now Leon is face to face with his biggest fear: the people he works for are bad guys. So naturally, Leon, being the guy he is, shoots him. However, he wasn't the only one affected by the situation. A woman named Shen also wants to bring the situation that happened in Penistam to the public, because her brother was infected and left for dead. She's been rehabilitating her brother as much as she can, and this is where Leon tracks her and helps to find answers. To which she just says the exact same thing Mad Dog said earlier, only this time Leon believes her and in fact is willing to help her and bring forth the evidence to the president and go from there. She gets squished, we get the worst tyrant in the history of the franchise, and Claire presses some more buttons. I am being very serious. Claire's entire segment in this is doing detective work, getting captured and tied up, but not tied to a chair, which means yes, she probably could escape, and pressing buttons. Thanks Capcom. This brings us to the end of the stupid show, where Leon has the information to show the US of A's wrongdoings, and makes the decision to cover it up. When just looking at this show and nothing else, it makes sense. Partially. Leon has been told countless times, fear, 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 and his fear being that the public just isn't ready for this kind of information, and can lead to some really big problems. So he'd rather cover it up and be the villain here, but when bringing in the overall RE lore, this starts to become the dumbest thing ever. Leon thinks he's doing the right thing because BOWs can scare people, except, you know, this takes place in 2006 and well, in 2004, a little place called Terra Grigia had a bioterrorist attack that was broadcasted live that showed BOWs, kind of defeating the whole point of the world is just not ready for BOWs because people clearly know BOWs are real. Okay, to give some credit, That's partially the reason. I think another reason is that this information can lead to a lot of uprising and just chaos, and he thinks that's just not worth it, which does kind of come to play in RE6 with the whole chaos in China we see. The bigger problem here is the way he handles it. See, I told you a reasoning that the show kind of just scrubs by, but the worst part is he just kind of tells Claire no when she asks, not really explaining his reasoning behind withholding information and leaving the relationship ending on a sour note in this show. We know their relationship gets better due to the way this falls in the timeline, but it's still just an awkward thing to do, because Leon as a character has done everything up until this point for the people he loves, i.e. Sherry and Claire. I mean, his whole reason for joining the secret BOW service was a means to protect Sherry and, in some regard, Claire. Now, years have passed since that point, and I would like to think Leon has a lot more leeway now, so you would think he would open up to one of the closest people in his life about his reasoning behind his decision. Instead, he just leaves it hanging and says, "See you later." Overall, this series is really bad, and there's zero reason to watch this. Truly. The only thing this series kind of bridges is Leon's understanding that it isn't as simple to bring down these corrupt organizations, and he begins leaning towards this whole taking them down alone and from the inside out mentality, which then ends up taking a very big toll on him, as we see soon enough.
I will show you fear.
Okay, now this one is the one. Damnation is the direct sequel to Degeneration and is by far the most RE-like movie. In fact, this is basically RE4 minus a few things. It's got Leon in a foreign country, Plagas, Ada, it's got cool foreign bro who dies, it's got Leon being cool action hero guy, and brings Leon as a character back to basically his RE4 counterpart. They even do the whole dance/face-off that Bruce and Fong Ling started.
What's your name?
Resident Evil movies have zero clue what they really want to be. Infinite Darkness tries to be serious and be a political drama, while Degeneration starts as that, but then leans heavily towards the RE aspects we know and love. Damnation is everything RE from the get-go, with a few political stuff in the background, like having the main bad be the president of this foreign country, that she herself started a civil war super low-key, just to position herself better in the world. She's also a complete badass, having a killer one-on-one sequence with Ada and then Leon later on. Speaking of Leon, we start seeing Leon become more frustrated in the American government, defying direct orders to leave, and instead staying because he really can't stand BOWs. Leon immediately runs into some old friends, and then his foil for this movie, Sasha. Sasha is similar to Leon in the sense that he wants to help people, and he also dislikes corrupt organizations, only he's willing to go to the extent of using BOWs if it means his people are free. Leading to the big question of this movie, the reason behind fighting and why you fight. Sasha even makes it a point to Leon that their fight between each other can end if Leon just puts down his gun. Leon eventually answers this question at the end, but to be honest, it just feels like a bunch of gibberish. Ada is also around impersonating BSAA, and that ends up with her getting a warrant for her arrest globally, and you would think this would play a big role in RE6, but as we know, they don't really care. Chris doesn't make mention of it, Piers doesn't. Sure, they're a bit apprehensive when they first meet her, but that's about it. There's also an after credits scene here that loosely ties to RE6. Ada ends up doing an auction of the Plaga, and we see a figure who looks similar to Simmons, but we'll find out later that this doesn't make much sense. So characters and motives aren't really lining up as we head into RE6, but the world as a whole is being established pretty well. Countries are starting to get their hands on BOWs, and it starts becoming almost this nuclear race to make sure you have one, leading to events like we see in Europe in RE6. With this being more focused on the action and fun set pieces, Leon's character is taking a back seat for the cool shit, which there is plenty. Like 3 tyrants in this movie. Usually there's just one, and it's oftentimes some big bad we know that's being turned into one who ends up being super ugly. Here, it's the OG. If 3 OG tyrants wasn't enough to make you think this movie was cool, what if we add the ability to mind control lickers and have tyrants and lickers fight as Leon does some background shooting? A little side note about the mind control. Sasha, whenever he does it, has his eyes glow red, and when Leon and him meet up again, Leon just stands there and asks him, "Hey, are you still evil?" He's still dumb, but it's kind of charming and funny here. Leon and Sasha do their best to take down a tyrant, but with 2 more still roaming around, the odds are looking against them. Then good old US of A comes in to save the day. We circle back to Sasha and Leon's heart-to-heart, and end with a gunshot.
That is my answer. And your answer. Buddy.
Earlier in the movie, Bro here asked Leon about the plaga, to which Leon says there's only one way to get rid of it, and it's to remove it, and it's attached to your lower spine section. So, yeah, Leon's a surgeon. Leon ends the movie drinking a little bit, and that's that. These movies don't really give Leon's character the depth I was hoping to find. They don't seem to know what to do with him other than make him cool. They try to write him deep, but then they forget certain aspects like Claire, or they make him too dark and edgy, and it just doesn't feel right. This movie is probably the closest Leon to the games, but even that's not saying much. Making the ending of 6 still kind of weird, but from what we've seen so far, not too far-fetched. Like, Leon would very much cover up something for someone he cares about, but the whole, the president would want this too, just seems wrong. If he feels it's for the better of the world or keeps the world safe, he doesn't mind. It also could be because Helena's a girl. Simp!
Women.
Story and movies are fine and all, but this is about RE6, and to really delve into this game and its many issues, I kind of have to go campaign by campaign. But before we do that, let's look at Leon's very first chapter, as it tells us immediately what kind of game this is. Taking about an hour or so to complete, the chapter begins in Tall Oaks University and sets the mood for the campaign. Dark, serious, and extremely dramatic. The game wants you to be immersed, and to do that they're taking away control, forcing you to walk when they say walk and letting you run when they say run. Even when you get full control, you're technically running down corridors they want you to. Exploring or off-beaten paths are not something you're going to see much of in this game. And on the topic of scene, the camera is a bit too hands-on. What I mean by that is it likes to show you your objective or a point of interest. Enter a new room, oh, look over here. Oh, this might be interesting. Oh, look this way. Oh, you see that thing right there? You might need that later. The game doesn't want you to interact organically. It wants you to interact when it says to. Open the door when it says to, because this fancy cutscene needs to play first, making the game feel way more theme park-like than the previous titles. And when we shine this light on the game, you start to see all the flaws in the way the game works, making it feel very stale and straightforward. Like with these big sections, you can see all the wires and how it's not really an open area to explore, but more of a run down and shoot things and reach the door to go to the next section. Simply put, it's like a beat 'em up. Take out the enemies and wait for the big go to pop up on the screen, except this time it's a door that requires your partner. I may be simplifying this a bit too much, but when the game wants you to be immersed into it, it's hard to with all these distractions, and this is just from the gameplay itself. I'm not even taking account for the whole cutscene per minute thing going on or the camera jerking around. The game is very much at odds with itself, especially in the Leon section where it wants to be spooky and atmospheric, but it also wants to be this big budget movie, and the gameplay doesn't necessarily bridge that gap. Sure, during certain cutscenes you have QTEs to kind of have some gameplay there, but it's still QTEs at the end of the day, and no one really likes them. To give some form of credit, there are certain sections like the underground train area that feel cinematic in gameplay, but once again this too has its own problems that it showcases. RE6 is where things start feeling samey. Like sure, you can move and shoot in this game, but it feels like we've been here before. These set pieces are all things we've done in previous games, and sometimes previous campaigns. Yes, I'm talking about U3 item thing. You have the whole cooped up in a small section while enemies surround you, aka horde mode, that shows up in some form across all the campaigns. That's been done to death by this point.
Sheen, this is the 7th week in a row you've shown Ultra Lord in class.
On the topic of bringing things back from the dead, zombies are the main enemies in Leon's campaign, but they do include special infected here, but not like Lickers or Hunter type special infected. Instead it's closer to that of Left 4 Dead. Having an enemy that just screeches, or the big fat one, or even big old titties. The thing about this though is it just feels so not RE. It feels like generic zombie archetypes when I feel like the Resident Evil franchise has always had interesting enemies for the most part, leaning way more towards body horror than say zombies with powers. After finishing a chapter in this game, you'll be greeted to the new upgrade system, and while at first I thought this was an improvement, I couldn't be more wrong. Instead of upgrading your weapon, you're now grabbing perks basically. Bonus damage to zombies, or with a handgun, or even more damage if you're playing solo. Replacing upgrading a specific type of weapon, In theory, this should create more of a personal playstyle. If you prefer to be more hand-to-hand combat type or supportive in a sense, you should be able to get that across on your profile, except upgrading takes forever and for the most part it doesn't feel different. I can't tell the difference between dropping more items or not. I also just miss upgrading my favorite weapon, seeing which one had bonuses like armor penetration or crit multipliers, but to be fair, this does align with the core concept of this game of not really being good at one specific thing and just okay across the board. Weapon variety is okay here. The coolest thing I guess is each character having something unique to them, like Leon being able to dual wield for example. But on repeated playthroughs, you can't really change it up, making it feel a bit stagnant. Okay, I'm probably gonna get flack for this. So let's go campaign by campaign, starting with the worst. Leon's campaign is really bad. So it has the best first chapter in my opinion, but after that things get progressively worse. Leon's story was supposed to be the RE4-like portion of the game, except it never really reaches those highs, and instead the game insists on telling you, rather than letting you see for yourself. Leon's campaign is fan service. You have Leon.
It's Raccoon City all over again.
Zombies.
It's Raccoon City all over again.
Ada.
It's Raccoon City all over again.
More zombies.
It's Raccoon City all over again.
Umbrella.
It's Raccoon City all over again.
You get the point. Leon's second chapter is almost like a breather chapter, but the issues start to arise again almost immediately this time. Oh, you need a key to get through? That key's over here, you don't have to search for it. You got separated from your partner and don't know where's the exit? Well, that's right over here too. These areas aren't big, and you don't even have to explore because the game doesn't care or want you to, which is almost anti-RE. I also just personally dislike this type of design where it tells you where everything is and where to go. At least let me ask you where it is with a button instead of popping up on the screen almost immediately. To try and meet the quota of RE4-like, they included some very light puzzles. Shooting a few bells, pressing the right switch, and later on opening up doors but only having 3 numbers, but it's all very straightforward, and it feels like they added these things to say it's here. I don't want to sit here and exclusively shit on this game because there are some actual improvements here as well, like now being able to revive despite your partner not being close, and they did include more sections of splitting from your partner, maybe a bit too much. Boss fights I think were pretty solid in 4, and 5 to an extent. And I actually think the boss fights here are good. There's a boss fight at the end of the chapter here that ends up feeling very Code Veronica, and if you know me, that's my favorite game in the series. I know. I like how this boss fight is constantly changing arenas, going from this big open space to this chase down a spiral staircase with characters being split up, and ending things with a fight on a minecart, which is pretty funny that Leon has found himself in a minecart section twice now. The chapter ends with Leon having to help Ada and Helena, resulting in Helena's sister being dropped down a giant hole. This is by far the most unique thing Resident Evil 6 does, and does so fairly well. And that's having certain sections in the game where characters cross over, only this is a full-blown multiplayer section. So whether you're playing Jake, Chris, or Leon, you'll run into another set of duos and be able to play together briefly. I'll delve more into each of their sections when we cross them. Chapter 3 is by far the worst part of this whole game, and it's not even close. Not even close. This is a bridging chapter to the end point of the game, and it's all about escaping the underground crypt area, focusing a lot on splitting up again, and even including a terrible underwater section complete with its own swimming mechanics. This game has a very wonky hitbox situation going on. That includes a lot of weird situations where you can be hit when it feels like you shouldn't be able to be. It's really noticeable underwater with the zombies, where getting anywhere near a certain area triggers the cutscene. This happened earlier during the train section, where it seems like this whole radius is a kill box. It's avoidable here, but it's just a little weird. The bigger problem stems from these really long animations, in which you're not invulnerable and can still take damage. For example, when you're being revived and get back up, if an enemy were to be in an attack animation, you will immediately die. There's a dodge mechanic here, but it's practically impossible to dodge because you're not given enough time to, or any frames of invincibility outside of the initial animation. Same goes for when you're being spit on by zombies. Your character does this whole waving thing and you cannot move or heal, yet you can still take extra damage. It's more annoying than it is, say, a problem for me with animations feeling like they last forever. This problem I have with animations rears its head all over this chapter, including the bridge section, which loves to do this whole, oh, the bridge is shaking, watch this animation, while the zombies move freely and yes, can hit you. Oh, we haven't even discussed the water section itself. The controls for swimming are rough. They feel extremely clunky, and there's this whole air mechanic going on, very similar to the one in Revelation. And it's funny because in Revelations the swimming is fine, a bit arcadey feeling, sure, but here it's stiff and feels plain awkward. When playing as Leon, you're spending most of the time in the water. There's this section here that on paper should be a fun little co-op moment, but we begin seeing my overall problem with this game, and that's that Capcom has a hard time showing restraint here. You're swimming around, and in the background is this giant fish that's hunting you down. You need to make it to the exit while your partner covers you. Swimming normally feels like you move at a solid pace, nothing too fast or too clunky. That changes when they decide to take direct control from you and turn it into a QTE, making it a button masher. While in this sense, Leon should be swimming faster, but it feels like he's swimming slower than before. And to make matters worse, it's not like this is just a one-time thing. It happens a handful of times before reaching the exit. Now onto this giant fish. I really hate this fish. Everything up until this moment where you're sliding down this waterfall thing has been serious. The president got infected, Leon wants to learn what's going on and isn't playing around, Helena loses her sister and vows revenge, even the people hiding in the cathedral were taken as a serious event when they started transforming because we let a monster in, to then skateboarding downhill as a giant fish goes nom nom nom. This is the big overall problem that Resident Evil 6 has, and that's wanting to be everything and anything. It wants to be this big serious cinematic story, but it also wants to be a fun goofy RE game. It wants you to take everything that's happening as dangerous, but don't mind the main characters breathing in the toxic fumes that infect everyone. It gets worse though, because right after the water slide, we get Leon and Helena faking their deaths and hopping on a plane no problem, giving extreme tonal whiplash. In trying to be the jack of all trades, it's truly a master of none. Everything feels stretched thin with pacing that feels pretty bad because they're trying to hurry us up to the next big set piece. This is only the first campaign we're covering. We still got 2 more. Chapter 4 is all about getting to China, starting with this long plane sequence that has Leon and Helena trying to get rid of a special infected that ends with Leon flying a plane and bringing it down, bringing us to our next big crossover section. Chapter 4 in most of the campaigns is the big crossover chapter. Most of these crossover sections are big open spaces with a boss or 2 thrown in. Teaming up with another set of characters in the middle of their own story does make things feel a bit alive, but these sections are extremely short. Now, everyone here fights something with someone, except the 2 big characters. This is literally just a piss measuring contest. Who's faster, who gets to use what first, and ends in a cutscene, that's that. Leon and Chris, who have never been on screen together, just get a few minutes and we're calling it a day. No shooting down enemies together or some giant boss. Nope, just go about your way. This would have been cool to have one big set piece in this warehouse, where both zombies and Javo were climbing in, and you could have even kept the whole who kills the most gets a new weapon or something. But this just shows to me Leon was very much an afterthought here, because every other campaign has cool team-ups, except Leon's. Sure, he's gonna have a moment with Ada soon, but it's just fan service for the shippers. At the very least, Leon's campaign does have a pretty good boss fight with Simmons here, taking place on a moving train as he transforms into this dog-like form, taking cover as he blows the train apart, dodging him by jumping across to the other train, running as he hunts you down and your partner covers you, makes this pretty memorable. Even having a small fake out ending is a nice little touch, except you can clearly see there's 5 chapters, but I'll give it to you. Leon's final chapter is once again about a city being overtaken by zombies, seeing everyone turn, hiding away in buildings, watching as they break down glass and using back alleyways to escape gives off a very small Outbreak vibe. Very, very small. I hate this car ride though. Can't stand it. You just really hate letting us play, don't you? Just gonna stay in the car, look around at all the smoke, but wait, do you hear that? Dinosaur Simmons is a little bit of an oddball design, but I kind of like it. Simmons boss fights are great. Look, I know I've been shitting on this game and QTEs, but something about beating the ever-loving shit out of Simmons does something to me. Let's go back to shitting on QTEs though, because they love to do this whole left trigger is left hand and right trigger is right hand, trying to mimic climbing in real life. And when I saw this, all I could think of was this.
You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey.
But this leads to the second most cinematic fight in this game, and it's extremely satisfying. Dropping down and saving Ada turns into a great little fight. Fighting on this narrow bridge, rolling around as he shoots and you're dodging, everything makes you feel like you could see the vision they were trying to accomplish with this game. It's a satisfying way to finish off Simmons, except there's one more fight after. Capcom's biggest enemy is Capcom. Don't forget that. At the very least, they try something new here, adding a lightning mechanic to make you feel a little more strategic, and using the rocket launcher as a final send-off is very fitting, even if a little jarring due to this awkward cut between gameplay and cutscene. Leon's campaign is just lacking. Another reason I think this kind of gameplay works in 4 and 5 is because it's one big long journey. In 6, we still have 2 more campaigns to go through, with each campaign being a little under 5 hours of gameplay. When compared to the 15-ish hours in 4, it's like they tried to do things similar, but there's no real personality here. It feels like it's here for the horror fans, pandering to that audience, because the other campaigns get a lot more variety and interesting gimmicks when compared. A lot of the complaints going into 6 was people asking for more of 4, and this was like them saying, hey, you can all shut up now, we did it. Because in reality, I think Chris's and Jake's campaign feel more like the RE6 game they wanted to make, especially because Leon's story technically ends first, while Jake's and more importantly Chris's feel like the true ending. TM. Okay, let's jump to a good campaign, but that has some dips here and there, and that's Baby Wesker. Jake, Chris, and Sherry, and Pierce, feel like the main characters in this game. Leon has the benefit of Ada and Simmons, but really everything revolves around Jake and Sherry, at least in the beginning. Jake's daddy being Wesker and Chris being the one who took down Wesker, alongside Jake being the only one with antibodies for the C virus, is some pretty good conflict. You can see how this feels more center stage than say some giant fish. Ironically, the T-Rex guy is actually important, so I can't make a joke about that. Jake's campaign was built around the idea of pursuit, and they achieved this pretty solidly. By using a new Nemesis-like character who is constantly on the hunt for the two, but also in general, it feels like Jake and Sherry rarely get a break. Someone is always on their tail, sometimes even natural disasters are chasing them. However, the new Nemesis character is weakly used. It's mostly scripted boss fights that he shows up in, and the other occasion being this weird stealth section. It would have been nice to have just a single level all about him hunting you, running from him in something that feels similar to RE3, but that just doesn't happen. He never really strikes fear into you like the way Nemesis did by jumping through a window with a rocket launcher. I mentioned earlier how everyone has some sort of unique weapon, and Jake by far gets the most unique and interesting, that being his hands. Being Wesker's son, he has similar abilities, but not as OP. He's not wave dashing around, and instead just dashing up to his enemies to punch them a few times. You can string together combos, bob and weave, but it's all tied to your stamina bar. Sometimes it can feel like you don't have enough, but there are skills that lengthen it or reduce the recovery time, letting you engage in the system a little bit more. Capcom doesn't go all in on this arcadey fun in the campaign, and really tries to limit you for some reason. Again, this just goes back to Capcom wanting to do everything and not single out an audience, so the systems that play sometimes feel a little not fully thought out. Right from the get-go, Jake's campaign starts with big set pieces, running around as guys get gunned down, doing acrobatics to get to the other side, and even quickly running into Big Tanko. Giving you one big area to fight him in, lots of room to run around, dodge, jump across to, and really showcase just how massive of a tank this guy is, although he is easily stopped by stairs and long walkways. The second crossover section is here, and perhaps the biggest, involving Piers and Chris as a set of duos help each other out, needing to blow up these anti-air machines while also dealing with these two giant creatures. Overall, I think this is probably a fun segment if, you know, you had people to play with. Playing solo, I just kind of ran into a lot of awkward downtime as I killed the first giant creature and just waited a lot. The final bit of the chapter revolves around Loverboy showing back up and fighting him in this pretty fun scripted event, starting with whack-a-mole as you wait for him to pop his head in, and then taking down his rides using machine guns. Chapter 2 is where things get funky. I mentioned recycled ideas, and oh boy, they love this one. It's in every single campaign. As Leon, you deal with some locked doors in China, Chris does it on a boat, and as Jake, we run around in the snow. Sherry ends up dropping the data on Jake, which is on 3 USBs, so we need to run around and collect those 3 things in order to cozy up in the cabin. The fact this shows up in all 3 campaigns is crazy and lazy. This is also where we get the whole stand your ground as enemies try to swarm you. The saving grace here is it's not long and it's followed up by a snowmobile section that reminds me of one of the missions from Call of Duty. It's a decent switch up on gameplay, and they keep the switch going as we head into the cave, running back into what's-his-face. I appreciate the variety of gameplay they're doing here, but I can't help but think this is stupid and makes no sense. Okay, it makes partial sense. So he's using these bats as another set of eyes, and we need to avoid them to avoid him. Okay, that's sound. But in just a moment, we're literally right in front of him and he just doesn't notice? Now, you could make the assumption that he's blind or not that smart, except if you go into the files, this is one of the rare cases of a person being infected heavily and maintaining, if not gaining, more intelligence, making this whole situation just gameplay for the sake of gameplay. Maybe I'm just nitpicking here, but it bothered me a lot. I don't think it helps that the stealth here is just bad. You're not really crouching or having a whole lot of areas to really run around and make use of stealth. It's mostly just making sure you're behind the bat and taking it out. There's a small section later that has a bit more oomph to it, but even then you can just kind of run by. They even introduce the floor making sound, but don't really use it outside of one small section that's easily completed. Being half-baked is kind of the name of the game here, but I'll throw you a bone. When you do trigger him to come check out all the noise, it changes to this first-person view as you hide. We get to see his vision, and it creates this nice little tension as he breaks the trash cans looking for you. There's also this section of closing doors that's probably a lot of fun to play with somebody, but then we get the ending of the chapter, which is just a giant QTE fest, so that's pretty lame. Being about a campaign and a half deep, I gotta say I think Capcom did a good job making this both extremely playable solo, but also pretty fun with somebody, something that was a big complaint I had with 5. And I think they made the co-op situations a lot more interesting, and that shows in the beginning of chapter 3. Starting with Jake and Sherry being split from each other and using their own wit and skill to get through. There's this really small part that is really neat that uses the camera as Jake. Each of these cameras has a weapon attached to it, so we cover Sherry from our end and help her make it through. She punches this code in and we observe from the cameras and then punch that code in ourselves. It's a cool little section. We then get this long scavenger hunt for medals and it's fine. It feels a bit similar to collecting 3 key items from earlier, but at least the location's pretty sweet. There's a big set piece of the tank, but it's all really to set up chapter 4, which starts with you on said bike. Driving down lanes as you avoid fires, enemies, and squeezing down tight walkways, creating this high adrenaline section. Something I think Jake's campaign captures really well is this whole constant need to be on the move. Anytime Jake and Sherry think they have a moment to catch their breath, someone else is at their door. Ignoring the whole being captured for 6 months thing, of course. Chapter 4 means big crossover, so we start off with Chris again, taking down Javos together and eventually a helicopter. Then teaming back up with Leon to take down Mr. Brightside, whose presence is severely lacking. I know it's only been a chapter since we saw him, but them parading him around as Nemesis Jr. didn't do him any favors. It also wasn't until this character showed up that I realized, oh yeah, there hasn't been a chainsaw in this game. And it's done fairly well over the course of 3 sections. Starting in a big open space where you can outmaneuver it, then into a bit of a tighter space with enemies surrounding you, and finally fighting it face to face on a very tiny boat. Short-lived, but well done. Now, let's talk about this Simmons twist because I saved it for here. Playing through the game, this twist is played up pretty strongly and is supposed to come off shocking. Sherry over the course of the campaign is constantly reporting in, following rules, and making sure she's doing as she's told. It isn't until Leon tells her that Simmons is the bad guy that she begins questioning everything. Even then, she's still at a crossroads. Believe in the guy who's basically family, or believe in her surrogate father. Oh, did you feel like that was a big key point that was missing? That's because it is. In the cabinet area, you can find a file that talks about Sherry and Simmons' relationship, and it's incredibly important. This gives details about Sherry basically being adopted by Simmons, who looked after her, and kept her incredibly close because of her infection. In fact, not many people even got to see Sherry outside of Claire. This recontextualizes a lot of things because at first you think, why wouldn't Sherry just believe Leon? But with this added context, makes sense and feels incredibly important. Yet the game glosses over this and doesn't care, so why should you? I mean, to even find this, you have to shoot the stupid blue things as a way to unlock it. Stupid BSA. The game already has so many moving parts and shit going on, so it threw it in a text and said, here's your context. Jake's Chapter 5 is the weakest Chapter 5, but has the highest high in terms of boss fight. In fact, it's probably the best fight in the game. Jake and Sherry get rescued by Chris and then proceed to evacuate, leading to the main part of this section, which is just turning on switches for the elevator. It gets more and more intense as more creatures show up and the machines swing around, but the real meat and potatoes of this chapter is the final fight with Old Boy. One giant lava arena that has to be a shout out to Junior's daddy, and we're cooking. It starts off with this run towards the exit, trying our best to get away from him, into this final duel with both Sherry and Jake putting bullets into him. This is pretty fun and fun, but things only get better as we drop closer to the lava, landing on the small platform as Big U shows off his upgraded arm. Slamming it around as you dodge and shoot, and yes, this is pretty satisfying, but this is when the more gets better. Bringing the whole Jake is a special character because he has hands home, because this is just a fist fight. It's so good. Stringing together combos, dodging, the QTEs here are actually satisfying, and this feels like such a proper send-off for this weak-ass bitch who should never be compared to Nemesis. Just saying. Only it's not. The final section is one long QTE event where you climb, drop some pipes on him, and then do the whole final shot, but it awkwardly turns cutscene thing. I get it, they wanted to go with a cinematic ending, but that fist fight was such a solid way to end the game and just have our characters finally get peace. We didn't need this final moment of U-Haul shooting lava out of his ass. It could have been a nice final moment between Sherry and Jake, but what do I know? I'm probably gonna get flack for this too. Let's talk about the best campaign now. When I say best, what I really mean is, I suppose, most consistent. All of these campaigns have problems and are much closer to each other despite me saying this is the best. I just think Chris has the clearest vision on what they set out to do and did so without the bumpy dips in quality. Well, some dips, but not as much as the others. It's like they took the end section of RE5 and said, let's make a whole campaign, but let's make it better. Gameplay is considerably faster in terms of gunplay here. We still have the whole funnel down a corridor thing, but instead of going for a spooky atmosphere or being pushed to run, we're instead doing firefights and pushing our way forward. Leon and Jake's campaign had special enemies like butterflies or the special infected, but the enemies here are way closer to something out of 5 or 4. Heads popping, arms transforming, and even these little cute critters. I do like that Leon's campaign set up the question of what hatches out of these, and Chris's answers that question. Despite these enemies being similar in design to 4 and 5, these ones carry guns, and in 5, that was my biggest problem. It felt like bullets did way too much damage, and here they're just a mild inconvenience. Good job, sincerely, but why did you change the cover shooter mechanic? In 5, they copied basically every game that ever did it. You press a button that puts you on the wall, you aim, you shoot, simple. Here, you hold down the left trigger, then use the joystick to pop out of a direction, then shoot. But if you let go of that left trigger, you awkwardly pop off of the wall. I have no idea why they designed it like this, but they did. And they really want you to engage with the system, even having a whole section dedicated to that in Chapter 2. Before we go chapter by chapter, I do want to speak on something that may just be my experience. I talked about how this game likes to take control from you and really tries to bring this cinematic experience. Chris's chapter isn't an exception, as those things still happen here, but I found it not as bad as the other two. I've been holding this off because I wanted to use it as a segue into the next portion of the video, which I still might, but gunplay in RE6 is actually pretty good. Shooting things feels satisfying. The game feels fun to play when it lets you, so with that in mind, Chris's campaign should be a knock out of the park with all this shooting. Except 6 still tries to be an RE game. Look, when you have Chris swinging in via helicopter with a whole squad of BSAA, maybe don't short the ammo. Throughout all of the Chris campaign, I found myself constantly out of ammo, unable to engage with the gameplay setup here. They want these big firefight set pieces, but then after one round of your assault rifle, you gotta go and beat up a few people. It's an odd choice because I even had the whole more resources thing equipped. Leon and Jake's campaign don't suffer as much from this problem due to the enemy types and Jake having melee as an option. But Chris is all about his gun. It's all about shooting here, and when you get stiffed on resources, it makes it feel bad. Like, if you're gonna have these big shootouts with tanks, don't put one foot in and still be like, well, actually, we're survival horror. Just go all in on the idea of big action. For a brief moment, it felt like this problem was fixed, but when you actively try to fight these enemies, I found myself running out again. So I just ignored them and ran by, making it feel like an awkward choice. In Leon's campaign, running from zombies is kind of like in line with the philosophy of the original game. There's still mandatory fight sections, but it didn't feel wrong, I guess. Jake's campaign is all about running, but Chris, they give you these big open spaces and it feels like they want you to fight, but you just don't have enough ammo to do so. I'm jumping all around here, but it's because this is such a persistent problem and shows up in the final boss fight. Because, okay, look, boss rooms in this game and in this era of RE typically have resources. Maybe not a lot, but usually enough to get you through the fight. Chris's final fight has 3 boxes of ammo, and sometimes that third box is just money. So if you come into this room without ammo, you're pretty fucked. Wait. Where's the duck? Sure, the boss drops a box of ammo here and there, and perhaps the game wants you to be reliant on Piers and his rod, but playing solo, you're at the mercy of the AI. Now, you're not completely out of options, you have the knife and melee, but it just feels like less engaging. And this is just made even more curious of a design choice because both Jake and Leon's final areas are filled with resources. You know what, let's just talk about everything. I think Chris's campaign does the whole we're splitting up thing better than any of the previous campaigns. Sherry and Helena both feel like they don't get main character sections. Sherry's last gameplay is watching Jake beat up U-Tank, Helena has to constantly watch Leon team up with Ada, Piers and Chris never have that. It feels split pretty evenly with both characters getting important roles whenever they're split. Hell, there's even a section when it starts with Chris shooting and Piers driving, and ends with Chris driving and Piers shooting. If that's not 50-50, I don't know what is. The gameplay here fits narratively with Piers. Piers in the story is always seen looking out for Chris despite Chris being the captain, and a lot of the times, Piers in-game is also looking out for Chris. Whether that's covering him as he makes his way across the bridge or the monkey bars. Chris probably has the most variety in terms of gameplay, having on-rail sections, giant bosses, and even flying a fighter jet. I also just like how Chris's campaign feels a lot more interactive. When you have to save the hostages, it's not just a, okay, shoot this guy over here, and is instead a chase down of these 2 enemies. Sure, the game marks them for you, but how you get to them and take them out is up to you. Or how when we need to get through the main door, we need to go through 2 sides of the ship, and we can tackle these however, it just feels a lot more free, making it much more interesting than say, hey, cover me while I turn this dial, or we need to collect these 3 USBs in order to cuddle. Speaking of collecting 3, at the very least in Chris's section, it forces you to interact with these enemies. In both Jake's and Leon's, you can just run and collect no biggie. Here, you'll get trapped and either wait for your partner or take the enemy down yourself. This game is just so weird. Like, in part, it wants to be this big cinematic experience, but it feels like it just doesn't know how to. For instance, when chasing Ada, there should be this sense of urgency of we need to get her now, and instead it's taking long routes, killing all the enemies, and still somehow catching up. But then you have sections like where you're covering Piers in a jet and waiting for him at the top of the bridge, and it does feel pretty epic. This game is just missing magic. It doesn't have that same moody action horror feeling of 4 or that big adventure feel of 5, despite having 6 different characters to follow. There's a bunch of ideas here that on paper seem to be well, like bringing Leon back and having Chris and Leon team up, but it's just so thoughtless. It feels like a checklist of everything they need to add to the game without really caring why or putting systems in place to enhance that experience. The game is just spread so thin, having filler chapters or maybe some interesting ideas that last for 20 minutes tops because there's just too much going on. It's basically ADHD the game. The direction here is messy, leading to a game that once you finish, you're like, yeah, that's a game. But we're not finished. We still have one more campaign that fills in, or at least should fill in, all the details still left in the air. Originally, Ada's campaign was unlocked after beating the 3 other campaigns. With current release versions of this game, it's unlocked from the get-go, and truth be told, this is where I stopped playing originally. I've never finished this campaign. Back when it came out, it was single player only, and well, after playing every campaign with my brother, it just didn't feel right. Nowadays, there's a second random who you can play as that's basically Discount Hunk.
How dare you stand where he stood?
I'm writing this before I finish the campaign, so let's hope that this brings a satisfying end as we tackle both the story and gameplay here.
Much later?
Well, Ada's campaigns have always been a behind-the-scenes look, tying up loose ends, and most times a small tease to the future, and that stands true here. Her story begins with her catching up on all the drama, being informed by Simmons to come to his private submarine, as there might be something she'll find interesting there. The main thing we can take away from Ada's side of the story overall is that Simmons is pretty dumb. When she arrives at the submarine, she finds a recording for a mission that was given to her by Simmons to capture Jake. Only, Ada never did that mission, nor does she work for Simmons. Simmons later tells us that this is all a ploy and 2 attacks are already going into play, one in the US and one in China after, all done by Neo Umbrella's leader, Ada Wong. So this sets Ada's story into motion and how she gets wrapped up into the overall story of the game. Simmons is using Ada as a scapegoat as he begins crashing out. And that's pretty much it for the first chapter in terms of story. Now, the more interesting thing about Ada's campaign is it being designed as single player only, or just for single player. You still have a lot of enemies around, but the AI definitely feels a little different here. It could be bugs because I don't know how else to explain this, but they do just feel less aggressive overall. Aggressive. Healing items are way more prominent, and we even get a few moments of downtime that weren't really around as often in the other campaigns. You even have the game trying to lean towards the whole spy aspect of Ada, including full-on stealth sections, or at least trying to. It wants you to try to move stealthily, but it's not forcing you to, it's just a suggestion. I think it's in part because the controls aren't really built for that. You can't really crouch around, the movement is pretty floaty, and the camera is way too close. I get that they want you to use the whole cover mechanic to get vision, but we already talked about how awkward this is, so trying to use it for stealth just doesn't work. The real focus of this chapter is all about escaping the submarine, and I like this change of environment. Having you progress through the level normally, but once the sub starts to sink, we travel vertically, creating a different kind of space to work in as we try to escape. Having chase sequences of outrunning water with small touches like fixed camera angles, and even a pretty unique set piece that revolves around a microphone. In order to get to the area we need to verify that we are who we say we are. This includes talking to ourselves and answering questions that we propose ourselves in order to prove to ourselves that we are ourselves. In the meantime, while we have an existential crisis, we are being swarmed with enemies, and if that sounds annoying, it's cause it is. But I kinda liked it. The goal is to stay on top of the area and close to the microphone, because if you're not, you'll have to re-answer the question, and Ada likes to be philosophical when she answers.
If you know me so well, you shouldn't need validation. A world of chaos? Not number 1 on my list, but it would make Simmons sway. So I might reconsider.
And that costs a lot of time. The cool thing though is that if you do re-answer, she answers pretty quickly.
Interesting story. I want to do some fact-checking though. I don't work for Simmons. I've got nothing to atone for.
Answer all questions into the microphone.
I have no intention of paying for any crimes I'm not guilty of.
Authorization approved.
For all the lazy stuff that's pretty easy to see in this game, the various voice lines are actually pretty good. I don't know if there's a lot to be fair, but I found this moment with Chris and Jake pretty unique because on one of my playthroughs I had Chris and Piers and heard something completely different.
And just so we're clear, you and I are not done talking yet. You got a lot of explaining to do.
We make it out of here alive, and I'll tell you whatever you want. I just hope you're ready to hear it.
Save the bullshit! I'm not the same man my father was. If it ever comes down to you and me, it'll be me. Got it?
Loud and clear.
No, you never put yourself on the line like that. Let's conserve what he got. We did what was right. We kept this world safe.
You're still his father. The kid had the right to know.
Well, I'll tell you this much. Can't say I've lacked for adventure working with you.
Sorry. I know it's never been easy being my partner.
Chapter 2 tells us everything we need to know about the rest of the campaign. She shows up to a location, shows us how she ends up in the crossover portion of the chapter, and then the chapter ends with a big reveal. The twist here kind of works for me. Ada makes her way through the lab section from Leon's campaign, just backwards, and even watches the same video as him. Difference is, where Leon was confused, Ada knows right away the game she's playing. She calls Simmons out and knows immediately this isn't Simmons, and instead the entire time it's been the other Ada she's been talking to, calling the real Simmons, and we get the big twist that Simmons is a dumbass and doesn't know what's going on because he hasn't heard from Ada in a long time. What this really means though is this scene here at the end of Damnation is kind of trash. It could still technically be Simmons because he doesn't really talk to her, and I saw people argue it's more of an auction as opposed to one-on-one. Still pretty stupid though. Chapter 2 is the monkey paw curling for me. You know how in every video I'm always glazing puzzles and how I say there should always be more puzzles? Well, I take it back, please Capcom. The whole first quarter of this chapter is puzzles, but like Fisher-Price puzzles. They shouldn't even count as puzzles, but alas, here we are. These are just so stupid. So you walk into the room and see a bunch of hanging bodies, as well as a door that seems to require some sort of indentation to open, and I thought, oh, okay, we probably shoot one of these bodies that drops the ring for us, but in reality, none of these bodies matter except for this one right here. Resident Evil 6 has some ugly textures. It's an old game, you know, you can't be mad at it for that, but environments, especially in this chapter, have this whole mushy thing going on where it all kind of just blends together. This is important because I am also blind. So it took me a minute to realize the track right here, you push the lever, shoot the body, it's really simple stuff. Next one is getting the electricity running via pushing and shooting bodies. You would think all he would need to do is walk over the open current, but instead the game wants you to shoot him so you can see this cutscene. The final puzzle makes use of Ada's crossbow. The platform has a weight limit and you need to pin the bodies up to the wall so you can walk safely over. Again, nothing crazy, but at least this one's cheeky. The Leon team up happens and we get some extra content at the end. That's basically reusing the Leon section but actually dealing with the cocoons, which is a nice little circle back moment. Chapter 3 is mostly nothing. It's just Ada's perspective during the events of China, trying to catch fake Ada, being the first one to run into the chainsaw monster, and helping out Jake and Sherry. Covering those two is pretty fun, using your sniper rifle from far away and feeling like the most Ada-like thing we've done in a good minute. But the chapter ends with Ada on a jet ski, and it's just so disappointing we don't get to ride it. Sure, we get a helicopter section, but this would have been a nice little callback to RE4. Chapter 4 serves as the big reveal of the entire game, and that's that fake Ada is, well, fake Ada. Okay. She's actually a woman named Carla who worked closely with Simmons and possibly had a romantic connection. Carla is the one behind Neo Umbrella and the attack in China as a way to get back at Simmons and Ada. So Simmons' main plan was to attack the US and the president mostly because he's from the family.
Welcome to the family, son.
No, that's 3 videos from now. The family was/is an organization that has been around longer than the US itself and basically shadow runs the country. If the president went public about the Raccoon City incident, which the family and everyone else you can think of had involvement in, it would have meant doom for Simmons' reign. Carla feels slighted for whatever reason, and this leads to her wanting to get revenge and ruin Simmons alongside Ada because, well, these two were kind of obsessed with her. That's why Simmons left for China, because he knew it was Carla. Carla was the main one who created the C virus, and eventually being tested on because she shared similar DNA or like match with Ada, I forget. So Simmons created his own Ada because the real Ada didn't want him. He talks about this in chapter 5. Anyways, Carla being transformed into Ada and told to be Ada would make anyone crazy. But then she injects herself with a new C virus and is now crazy. Turning into a pile of goo and talking about how she's the perfect Ada.
The real Ada! Me!
Carla dies in a pretty weak way and all that's left is our final confrontation with Simmons. This section of gameplay is what you expect by now. There is some more heart here when it comes to the stealth sections this time around, having a different camera view and even a whole alert sequence feeling more alive than the previous stuff, but they do it again, and I can't believe they did. The worst part is, they know what they did. In fact, even Ada comments on it.
Really? 3 separate passcodes?
I thought this was going to be cheeky, like she makes mention, but she hacks the door and we skip it. As a whole, we know we did too much, but nope, we actually do it again. So Carla is infected, and you remember that one scene in 5 with the creature covering the boat? It's that again, but fancier. I do enjoy the visual of Carla's face coming out of the goo, and even being the final form she takes for the boss fight, but it's bad. It's a gimmick fight that requires you to shoot a hole in her face so you can shoot the nitrogen tank, and that's it. Carla can't even damage you, you're fully supplied in ammo, and there's no timer, leading to this feeling underwhelming. No sense of urgency or that you need to rush past this. It's just, you know, take your time, stock up all you want, and when you're ready, you're ready. Chapter 5 is the big finale, but this is a pretty big letdown, especially when comparing to the other end chapters of the other campaigns. Chris, Leon, and Jake all end pretty uniquely. Chris is the giant squid baby, Leon has the big fly version of Simmons, and Jake has Nubs 2.0. Ada gets Simmons. Thematically, this makes sense, and it's pretty fitting. The whole reason Ada's journey even started is because of Simmons, so her finishing him off fits, but it's also kind of lazy. It's not like she gets a personal fight with Simmons after or before. It's literally everything we saw in the Leon campaign. T-Rex Simmons, check. Fight on the long middle section with added crotch shot, check. And final push off building and swinging around like Spider-Man, check. That's it for Ada in terms of gameplay. Sure, there's a long helicopter section here, but it's extremely padded. Helping out Leon and driving the copter downtown while taking out other copters is pretty fun, but it is a little strange to be helping out the civilians. Wow, that sounds kind of bad. We shoot down a mild horde of zombies as a way to help, but is anyone picking up these guys? Ada's campaign is meant to fill in the blanks, so her getting her own big bad wouldn't have made too much sense, but it doesn't even really feel like it adds anything extra outside of some minor things like Simmons' obsession. Which you would think would be because of some wrongdoing or backstabbing, but it's just because Ada didn't really give him the time of day and wasn't his dream girl. I'm pretty sure at one point in the fight, Simmons says something like, "You're not man enough for her" to Leon or something. Okay. Now, overall, the story is okay. I think the base of Ada being blamed for crimes and Jake being baby Wesker, whose blood is important for the world, is a pretty strong base. It's just nothing gets time to breathe here. Nothing is fleshed out. It's very bare. Chris being here makes sense as a kind of connection to Wesker and giving some semblance of resolution to the whole Wesker arc. Helena, while technically being sidelined most of the game, has a bigger importance here than, say, Leon. Leon's biggest connection is because of the president, and he wants to uncover how things ended up the way they did, but you could remove him from the story and nothing really changes. He doesn't affect the story in any way as opposed to Ada, Jake, and even Helena, and the rest of the cast basically. Leon's just here because he's Leon. You have all these moving parts, and it feels messy. We don't get to have really any growth with these characters. We don't see any changes over the course. We're just told that they now have a change of heart or feel back to themselves. It's very quick. To compare it to RE5, Sheva and Chris officially become partners at the end of chapter 2-3, leaving the rest of the remaining chapters to build up this camaraderie, and then that comes full circle to when Chris saves her at the end. We get all that stuff like in one chapter in this game, making it feel jarring. And while I do like the whole separate campaigns, I think it hurts the overall flow of the game. After completing one of the campaigns, all the stakes are kind of gone. Like for Ada, we know she can't possibly be in danger until the final time Leon sees her. And if you were to complete, say, Jake's campaign first, you know everything practically ends fine. Sure, they suggest this order, but I think it would have flowed a bit better with just one overall campaign that switched between characters. But Capcom wanted to appease everyone and just let themselves very thin. At the very least, Ada's final scene is very cathartic. We never see Ada lose her cool or her demeanor, maybe some slight moments here and there, but she always comes back. Here we see her just kind of let loose after everything that's happened in game, spraying her gun all over the lab, and it's satisfying to see Ada with a strong emotion and then immediately put her cool face back on and get back to work. Then we have one final end credit scene that sets up the future, except not really. We get a glimpse of Jake checking out BOWs in exchange for an apple, and it's nice to see him keep that same value instilled in him by Sherry. But we know now that Capcom hasn't really done anything with this and went into a completely different direction. Jake could technically make a reappearance, but I'd bet my money on Billy appearing before him. So we tackled almost everything in Resident Evil 6, but we still have a few loose ends to cover. I'm gonna talk about everything about this game so I don't ever have to talk about it again. Remember a while back how I mentioned Left 4 Dead and how some of these newer zombie types felt ripped from that game? Well, Agent Hunt is basically Capcom's take on versus mode. You take the role of an enemy in someone else's campaign with the goal of stopping them, but only in certain sections of each character's campaign. Now, the caveat here is RE6 is kind of dead in terms of multiplayer unless you have people to set games up with, and RE6 has a handful of modes that I'm probably not going to get to show off here, but we will talk about. Agent Hunt seems like a fun time, but I have a feeling most people turn this feature off. Sounds like it kind of just threw you into random games with random difficulties, creating a very skewed experience depending on the other player's choices. Multiplayer and Resident Evil is such a funny topic because Capcom just doesn't know what to do with it. It's like they release all these game modes trying to create a fun time, but not really knowing what the audience wants in terms of RE multiplayer. It's like they're allergic to something. Now, let's be honest about one thing, and it's that Capcom loves DLC and really any type of DLC. When RE6 released, it only had 2 online game modes, that being Agent Hunt and Mercenaries. However, on December 18th, 2012, they released 4 different game modes via DLC. Siege, a 3v3 game mode where human characters protect a BSA agent as the other team tries to take them down, almost like a more confined Agent Hunt. Next, we have Predator, which is a prelude to the asymmetrical craze. It's a game mode with 6 rounds and 5 players where each player gets a turn being Mr. U-Tank, while the others try to take him down and I guess each other, I'm not sure. Then we have Survivors, which is just RE PvP, and who really cares about that? And last, we probably have the most interesting sounding game mode of the bunch, and that being Onslaught. Think of this as Mercenaries versus. It's you versus another player as you both deal with enemies and rack up points just like in Mercenaries. The big switch here being once you reach a combo of 30, you'll send those enemies over to the other player as these green and stronger enemies in the hopes to overwhelm them and win the game. All these modes sound fine, but by the time the DLC released, I'm pretty sure the game's multiplayer was already dying. You don't get a group of friends to load up RE6 the same way you would other games. Even more so when most of RE6's content is built around 2 players. So all these modes with extra players can be hard to fill and really play the game mode how it's supposed to be. And while RE6 has been released across multiple consoles, there is no crossplay here, which may have bridged that gap a little. And finally, time to talk about Mercenaries. It's a long-running game mode by this point, showing up in 4, 5, and even having its own game, and this never really clicked for me until kind of here. It's the exact same thing as previous titles, but I don't know. I already said I found 6's gunplay to be pretty fun, and when the whole point of the mode is to use said gameplay, I'm kind of sold. It's satisfying using everything at your disposal just to wipe enemies, creating a long streak of combos, running quickly to the next enemy to make sure you don't lose that combo, and it's all just pretty fun. You can also play this in co-op, and I don't know why I thought this mode was more than 2 players, but I guess not. And that's pretty much it for RE6. I was debating on replaying through the campaigns and co-op to see if my opinion changes on things, but I feel it would still be the same, just a bit more fun by having someone else to play with. It would still be the same flashy set pieces, just offset by a friend being around, which could make things more funny, but I would rather spend time playing It Takes Two or Repo than this.
I'm friends again.
So the mom cheated.
If you want, you can borrow the book.
Mommy cheated on Daddy. She's a hoe.
Sorry.
Resident Evil 6 is a lot of good ideas but with no thought. It feels big budget but shallow. These characters, aside from maybe Chris, haven't really moved anywhere, and even Chris is kind of a rehash of 5, but instead of it going good, it ends bad. Imagine if instead of this being a Leon and Helena campaign, it was a Leon and Ada one, moving their relationship forward, or even a Chris and Leon campaign that was more focused in. Like have Ada come ask Leon for help or something, or even Leon ask Chris for help. Have these characters interact in a way that creates something new, instead of telling us this is basically Raccoon City all over again. It's really hard to care about things when every few minutes there's this giant explosion going off, or this extremely dramatic scene of someone losing a sister, and then you're shooting a fish. You have a character like Jake who is pretty interesting paired with Sherry, and it never really goes anywhere with that storyline because everything is rush, rush, rush. And even including a big character like U-Tank who's supposed to be this overwhelming force, but really feels like fodder. I think the worst part too about this being so ooh and is that none of this is really memorable, especially when compared to 4 and 5. 4 had some pretty iconic set pieces, the village, the first giant fight, and Salazar's castle. And even 5 has some pretty okay pieces. Actually, I don't know what really stands out there. The marshlands?
That's in the marshlands.
Irving? I don't know. But when it comes to 6, I can't really think of one place that's like, oh, that was a banger set piece. It's all fine, but nothing truly memorable, at least to me. I think we've talked plenty about this game, and at this point we'll probably just end up walking in circles to points I've already discussed. Plus, this is by far the biggest video I've ever had to make. As always, I'm interested in hearing your guys' opinion on the game and how you feel about it. Which I do read everything and appreciate it all, so thank you. Well, we've reached the one game I knew was going to be hell to do, so everything after this should be smooth sailing. If you've been around this channel for long, you know I typically do some sort of after credit scene, a joke to tease the future videos, or something like that. But I was thinking, and if you're looking at the time left in the video, you're probably like, what else could you possibly talk about? Well, look, I might as well finish what I started, and next on that list is Resident Evil Vendetta, a movie that takes one step forward and about 2 steps back, bringing together Chris and Leon finally for a duo mission, and surprisingly tagging Rebecca along for the ride. The movie is set about a year or so after the events of Resident Evil 6, with both of our main characters dealing with the events the best way they know how. Leon with drinking, and Chris continuing with the BSAA. Chris is looking for a man named Ares, which leads him to this totally unfamiliar mansion and situation that he's never been in before. You're 3 for 3 now, Chris. Ares with his duo of BOWs, Lust and Gluttony, are of course looking for revenge against the world. Ares is really Wesker coded, so much so I think our boy Chris may have fell in love again. Our main bad this time is where the name Vendetta comes from. Having his wedding crash and the bride left hanging leads him to seeking revenge. He's created this new virus that allows him to choose who gets infected and be able to have them fully under control. So Rebecca, Chris, and Leon are of course setting out to stop him. Now, characterization isn't something you're going to find in these movies, we've established that, but these movies have gotten better at focusing on what people want to see. We don't really care about some no-name girl and her past trauma, we want more of the characters we know, see new interactions, or find out things we didn't know. Which this movie does so surfacely. Rebecca isn't the same Rebecca last seen in Resident Evil 1. She's now working as a scientist trying her best to help people, carrying with her role as team medic but like globally expanded. While at first I thought this change was weird and kind of awkward, the longer I sat on it, the more it made sense. Rebecca, as seen in 0 and 1, well, mostly 0 in this sense, has been capable of taking care of herself, which does stand true in this movie, with her being resourceful during the outbreak in her lab. I also think her design here is great, looking like a proper older Rebecca, but the movie still carries the same problems with it from before though, keeping with that whole our heroines being sidelined. That scene I mentioned of the outbreak is the only action scene she gets. After this, she becomes the movie's damsel in distress. That's not to say she doesn't play an important role in the movie, seeing as she's the one who created the vaccine, but I just wish characters like her and Claire got more to do in these movies than be here for the sake of being here. Okay, I do have to amend the team for giving me a new thumbs up though. Chris is the same old Chris you know. Good guy trying to do the right thing. He definitely has these older brother vibes, which fits for the movie, and of course it's nice to see Rebecca and Chris interact after so long. He's clearly affected by his past experiences, giving no-name soldier guy some advice and a bit of trauma dumping. Usually Chris is the serious guy, but it's nice to see him be a bit more playful here, and he got the biggest laugh out of me with this scene here. Leon. Actually, he's done pretty fine here. Except for one thing, and it's super egregious. Ever since Damnation, Leon has been on this kind of downward spiral, kind of wondering how long this fight is going to go on and always around a bottle. That rings the most true here. Leon is full on drunk status and is basically Chris from RE6. His squad got wiped out in the beginning of the movie and he's just fed up. Chris and Rebecca try to talk some sense into him, but it's not until the guy who sold out his squad shows up that it really shakes him. It's a pretty basic finding the will to fight again. Okay, that works, but when the big set piece at the end kicks off is where the problem begins. Leon is a good guy for all intents and purposes. He wants to help. If innocent people are being eaten, he wants to try to help them as showcased in 6. The big bad ends up setting off his attack, but it's not as widespread as, say, Raccoon City or Tall Oaks. Yes, infected are running around, but it also seems innocent people are just driving home. So when Leon's big set piece of outrunning these fast as shit dogs, and he starts using these innocent people's vehicles as a means of explosion, it's very questionable. It's my biggest problem with the movie and sticks out like a sore thumb. And I just can't buy Leon would do something like this. It goes against everything established in the RE franchise. Other than that, Leon is about what you expect 4 movies deep. He does cool things and somehow always has his motorcycle on him like he has an open inventory slot. One thing that's pretty apparent in these movies is them having a hard time creating a strong villain. Throughout all these films, the main bad is pretty forgettable. In my personal opinion, Damnation was the closest they got to something decent. I actually had some pretty high hopes at the start of this movie and thought they might have cooked something up, but then they flipped the script and gave us Simmons 2.0. Aries' wife has a strong resemblance to Rebecca, so he plans to marry her. When she obviously doesn't agree, he decides to infect her and then marry her. He also dies in a way that makes you go, huh, so he really was Simmons 2.0. Of course, there's a big tyrant fight to end the movie, and to give the movie credit, the action scenes are probably the best out of them all. The first fight with Chris and Ares is extremely solid. The second fight on the rooftop is pretty good even with the Stormtrooper shooting going on, and Chris and Leon's hallway scene is everything I wanted. The final fight is okay and ends things in a typical fashion. Look, I have a small critique, but I sway on this. Having tyrants talk does bother me, but I'm also like, whatever, it is what it is. Look, I haven't really decided if it's stupid or I just hate it yet. It's an okay movie, something to pass the time or if you've been itching for more Chris and Leon together, but we all know these movies aren't anything crazy and have a very low bar to pass. So when they don't pass it, it's an interesting viewing experience, just like this movie is so weird to watch. From screenshots, it looks good visually, but in motion, something about it is just off. I saw a comment that really struck what my problem with it was, and basically it just feels like fan animation. He was talking about some ads on some particular sites, I don't know what he meant. I shit you not, this is like endgame for Resident Evil and really made me question if I want these characters interacting with each other ever again. I don't use the term cringe a lot, but when all the characters are down and out, and every one of them looks to the sky like they had 8 previous games built up to Sora being the one to come and save everyone, I cringed a little. That's the only moment that made me roll my eyes, and of course I'm being hyperbole with the statements. Rebecca, Claire, Chris, and Leon are all back for this new adventure, with Jill being the newcomer, and it's definitely a choice here. Rebecca looks the same from the previous movie, alongside Chris, who just looks a bit older, with Claire looking like she just finished filming Infinite Darkness, and Leon getting some added hair to his arms. Jill looks at the oddball here, and it's not because her design isn't good, because it is, but everyone just has these older looks to them, and Jill looks straight ripped from the RE3 remake. When she's next to Chris, you wouldn't be wrong if you guessed this was his younger coworker or even his younger sister. Despite these two being in their 40s, and that's not to say people can't look good in their 40s because they do, but she just looks wrong and not appropriately aged when Chris does. Even when taking into account Jill herself has been through just as much as Chris has, and even more in the plot itself brings up Wesker's mind control. I've made this pretty aware in previous videos, or maybe I haven't, I can't remember, but I've never played the RE3 remake, so I don't know that characterization of Jill. All I know is the Jill up to the point of the videos I covered. She's always been determined and capable, but never a hothead or wanting to tackle things solo. So when this Jill is frustrated and always doing things alone, I was a little confused. They try to justify this in the movie with the context of Wesker's mind control being one of the reasons, but it feels more like a hand wave than anything. The opening of this movie is really solid, I think. Peering into the perspectives of Umbrella grunt workers during the Raccoon City incidents, seeing their reaction to being treated as disposable and what I'm assuming our two best friends or perhaps close co-workers went through. In a sense, the main bad here is the same as our heroes, just at the opposite end. Where our heroes left the Raccoon City incident, they decided to fight, and here, Dylan is deciding to bring the world down. I've said this before, but the base of some stuff in the RE franchise, movies, and games 6 is really good, but they just lost the sauce. Cause the main bad here is particularly whiny, but he's my favorite because he calls out every single character.
Leon S. Kennedy, working hard for people who lie and cover up the truth. And Chris Redfield. Despite the fact you lose team members on every single mission, you keep coming back with more.
Aside from that, he's just a catalyst for the final fight and team up. The movie has to be satire. Not only for the clip I just played, but in the final fight, everyone is doing cool shit. Jill and Chris randomly spawn in with rocket launchers, Leon's doing what Leon does, but Rebecca and Claire are literally at the computer typing away. Not only that, they take turns. It has to be a joke at this point, and it got me so good. Jill is obviously the main character in this movie. She gets the most screen time, I feel, and does the most. But finally, after 4 movies, they finally made Leon the best character. Leon's one-liners in this movie are really good. They're delivered with the same tone as RE4 Leon, and Matthew Mercer was in his bag recording these lines. I do have to say though, the one that caught me really off guard was this one.
This is for my father!
He was Arius' guard dog. You were his bitch.
You. Yes, you. There's an after credit scene with this character at the end of Vendetta, but I thought, and you know, to be fair, the track record of after credit scenes in the RE franchise haven't really gone anywhere, so when she showed back up, I was amazed she made it to the sequel. But not only did she make it, Pierce did too.
There was this guy named Pierce. I wanted him to take over after me. I trusted him, and he trusted me. He fought alongside me, then...
Not only that, this is the most direct continuation of movies. Dylan is using a more advanced virus to the previous one and was in close contact with Ares, making it a nice little follow-up. This is the most turn your brain off and just enjoy movie. It has problems with the animation and sound effects, but if you love these characters, this is really a love letter for you. Sure, it could be better and less of a superhero movie, but it's fine. All these movies are pretty bad overall, but there's just enough there for fans of this franchise to get the most out of it. Okay, to finally put an end to this and this video, let's finish off with a quick ranking. Coming in dead last is Infinite Darkness, by far the worst of them all. A terrible plotline, characters acting stupid, and pretty subpar action. Worst of it all, it's broken into episodes. After that, we got Degeneration. It's the movie with the most interesting start that quickly starts to drag, and by far the worst Leon design that ever graced the screen. Following up that, we have the best Leon appearance, but a pretty mid movie in Death Island. I just talked about this, so you know. In second place, we got Vendetta. I told you my only 2 gripes are Rebecca not getting more to do and Leon helping by exploding cars. Other than that, it's pretty much what I expect from these movies. First is obviously Damnation. It feels the most solid all around and is the only movie to have Ada and feels like a spiritual successor to RE4. And there we have it. One long ass game and 4 CG movies. Consider this my thank you for waiting for so long for this upload. I hope you had an enjoyable time if you made it this far, and put the movies in as a break of sorts between the messiness of RE6 and kind of finish this era of RE before we start heading into the more modern style of things. So I'll catch you all at either the surprise video or Revelations 2, it's kind of up in the air, but I'll see you soon. Take it easy.
Top row. Ah!
Matt Damon!